Bonjour, je m'appelle Justin Henderson. Nah, okay, I'm just messing with you. This better not be in French because I didn't pay that much attention in high school. There's a lot of different ways of saying hello, but really, you're here. It's Friday, and I don't know. I've come to enjoy these little get-togethers on Friday. So today, I'm talking to you all about the new role-based labs. Um, and I probably should have a disclaimer, an asterisk, this is not a new SANS thing. This didn't come from SANS. This is this is just me trying to level up. And actually the word level up is fairly appropriate because I don't know about you, but every once in a while, not near as much as I'd like, I'll play video games. And growing up as a kid, I played a lot of video games. Like one of my favorite games that I'll still, as an adult, sometimes go back and replay. Okay, don't judge me for this, or I guess technically, if you do judge me for this, then shame on you because it's a fantastic game. Um, Final Fantasy Tactics. Final Fantasy Tactics. Here, let me share my screen here. This one. The one where you picked a job class and your characters would level up, and then as you became a certain level of certain jobs, you could change into new jobs, and you could basically keep promoting and getting stronger and stronger, and the little ring, and you try to master them all. And I don't know why, but I always loved that. I like that concept, and I go back to that from time to time. But as I was authoring SEC555 SIEM with Tactical Analytics, I kind of came back to that in my head. I'm the sole author of SEC555 SIEM with Tactical Analytics. I also co-author 530 Defensible Security Architecture and Engineering. And, well, your brother's awesome. But as I got to thinking about this, in 555 especially, it's kind of interesting because I have students who are analysts. I have students who are engineers, like they implement like SIMs and SOAR and stuff like that. I'll get a few data scientists, and I actually get a decent amount of management leadership. And so the classes are fairly diverse, but I don't want to make my class really a pure play management class, a pure play data science class. I don't want to make it an engineer class or an analyst class. I want to touch on the concepts that SOCs need when it comes to what data to collect, what to analyze, what to do with it. And so how do I do that without making a whole bunch of new content and spinning off into different classes? And so I got to thinking more and more about, video games approach and how they level up. And so what I ended up doing is I implemented some changes, and this is only in 555 right now, by the way, where what happens is when you hit a certain labs, I don't have this across all labs. I'm probably not going to do it for all labs, but I want to get this to where a majority of my labs are like this. And so currently in 555, I have 4 role-based labs. So if you want to be like, haha, I took the best SANS class ever because it's the only one that truly has role-based labs. Here it is. So for example, there's a concept we talk about in day 5 called Sigma generic signatures. It's really powerful stuff. My goal for this live stream is not to teach a class necessarily, but what I wanted to do is I want to improve the quality of the class and speak to people about the same topic, but from different angles. And so for these role-based labs, and every class that has had this so far they just love it. That's not coming from me. There's proof. If you find 555 alumni and ask them, people who've taken the class, if they've done the role-based labs, you'll hear it right from the horse's mouth. Because what happens is when we hit the lab, you basically have more than one version of it. Like in this one, by the way, I'm going to release a free VM with 2 topics, 4 labs. I already have it, but I'm going to update the labs to match the current version of the class because there's been a few updates. So you'll actually get free labs out of this. You'll have to get the free lab link from Twitter or LinkedIn later. It'll probably be later this weekend or maybe early next week when I post that. But I'm going to give away free 4 labs, which are really on 2 topics. This is one of them, by the way. So Sigma generic signatures, well, when we hit that lab, I cover it from 2 different angles. The first one I call the engineer lab. If you're in a job where you get to put hands on keyboard and implement things, well, it might make more sense for you to do this lab because it's about mass implementing about 400 or 500 rules that work with pretty much any SIEM by converting from Sigma format to Splunk to Elastic too. I saw someone here with Alien Vault as an example. And now not only do you have rules that are already in place because all you did was convert them, but you also know what MITRE techniques you now have coverage of. Plus, because I can, in that lab, I show you how to do automated testing, where I go through a code, a script, that shows you how to not only convert the rules, but test them against historical data. Oh, that's pretty cool, right? But what if you don't put hands on keyboards? What happens if you're more in a management role, like a leadership? Well, same topic, still on Sigma. I have a leadership role. And oddly, I would say of the 2 labs, this one's actually more, it tends to be more loved. I think people think that the engineer one's more cool. It's definitely useful and actionable. But when people do the leadership lab, like engineers and analysts doing the leadership lab, they're like, wow, that was actually pretty amazing and super helpful. I thought it was going to be horrible. And no, so because this one, what we do is we use the Sigma rule sets to figure out what detection capabilities we have using MITRE Navigator, but we compare that against data visibility and we do gap analysis. So just because I can, let me go in here for a second. So for example, what we'll do is we'll create multiple layers using MITRE Navigator and we'll compare, show me data source visibility where I have visibility, but I'm missing alert rules. Meaning I have the data that I could have found the technique, but there's no alerts that would have automatically triggered. Therefore, that's a gap. Well, I've got a couple gaps here if they highlight. Windows missing alerts, and we kind of compare that versus Sysmon. Well, here's where if I had Sysmon, I actually have a lot more visibility. But because of that, that just shows even more of, well, had visibility, but I don't have the detection. All these blue boxes are areas that I really need detection rules if that coverage matters to me. By the way, your goal is not to check all the boxes. We talk about that in day 1, and there's a lab that shows you how to do that. Figure out what matters. And we go through here and we start doing all these different gaps and figuring, okay, what if I had alert rules, but I didn't have the data source for it to even trigger on in the first place? Like all these red boxes here, this is where the Sigma rules by default, it's about 600 rules at this point. It covers a whole bunch of MITRE techniques, but an alert rule without any data to ever map it to search, it's never going to trigger because you don't have any data. And so on this one, this would be like, hey, are you collecting application, system, security? Yay! You have all these gaps. Because it's not enough. It's not enough. And so the lab walks through that. And so like if you're in one of those companies that they're trying to figure out, like, do I actually need Sysmon? Well, this type of lab will help you figure out like visibility and why that data source actually matters. And in terms and with a pictorial graph on how to kind of showcase that. Where the engineer lab is kind of, we go through a script converting this type of rule format, Sigma rule format, because at the end, we print out a map that helps us see what rule coverage we have, which is this right here. Any shade, whether it's light pink or red, means that there's rules already in the Sigma generic signatures. So to me, what I'm trying to get to is I'm trying to go back to the old gamer style concept of choosing your role, knowing that you aren't a single role. What do I mean? What I mean is, I would guess there's a really good chance that no one in here, like you're like, I'm a security analyst, and that's the only thing I ever do. I just analyze things. I would still guess sometimes you dabble in engineer, sometimes you do scripting, sometimes you have to talk to leadership. And so there's some line blurring here. A data scientist still needs to know the engineer side, and they still need to know the analyst side. Otherwise, how does their machine learning and all the things they're doing, how does that make sense? And leaders, yes, they're not writing scripts all the time, but if they can dip their toes in that water, all of a sudden it allows them to become even more capable because they can talk and they understand things more. And so in the class, I've got multiple labs, and they're really cool topics like Docker, right? If you're dealing with containers, we have a lab on how do you actually collect and handle logs from a bunch of disparate containers? Well, how do you analyze that data? Those are really two completely different skill sets. Now, let me go back to this role-based lab. In class, the way I've structured this is I only actually give enough time to do one lab. You only have enough time to do one lab. Because at the end of the day, 555 is a boot camp, then we stick around for roughly 1-2 hours, and people usually do the other role-based labs. Because I don't want you to go so fast that you don't really get the points out of it. So it's kind of structured that as we hit the labs, you choose one, and then at the end of the day, you can choose others, and it doesn't matter because when you leave, you have all the labs and you can go back through them as much as you want. That's kind of the value add. If you ever taken classes, even outside of SANS, my favorite part has always been personally the labs. I mean, maybe that's not exactly true because if you have a really good instructor who's hilarious or like just like maybe they're super polished. John Hubbard for me, he's very polished, and when I listen to him, it's kind of mesmerizing. That's always really cool too. But I like the labs. So for my classes, I try to focus on some serious lab concepts. Even like, for example, this is one of the other free labs that you'll get. This is called Master Inventory. In class, one of the topics that I stress from a detection standpoint is you have to understand your environment, know your assets. That's really, really, really hard. Critical control number one, right? Inventory of authorized and unauthorized assets. Well, historically, that's just been an analyst lab. I give a whole bunch of data sources, DNS, DHCP, HTTP, connections, Windows, vulnerability scan data, and all these different data sources. And then I challenge the students, okay, go find, and for every single IP in the data sets, is it authorized? Is it not? And so the analyst lab teaches you how to come up with the concept, the logic. But realistically, what that means is people understand it, they think it's cool, but they never go back to work and actually do that thing. And I don't like that because I want everything to be actionable content. So like one of the free dual role labs I'm releasing is this one, which shows you how to logically come up with that. But then look at this one. Build a Python script to automatically categorize devices as known, unknown, and unauthorized. So that lab, you basically take the logic that came from the other lab, but you're literally building out. This is the data set that you would have had in the other lab. You go through using some information and you build out Python scripts using a Jupyter notebook. And you just walk through the logic piece by piece by piece. And it starts to put things into kind of buckets. Like here's the current unknown versus the known good versus known unauthorized. And So you start to bucket these in, and at the end of the lab, spoiler alert, by the way, list of unknown systems is empty because ideally you have logic that nothing is unknown. Really, when you first put this in production, you'll have unknowns, you'll have to think of the logic, and then you'll update the script. So there are no unknowns. You have a list of authorized systems, right? And then you have a list of unauthorized systems. And not only does it list them out, but it lists all the different reasons. Because in this lab, there's multiple ways you could have found the unauthorized systems, the unauthorized assets. And I do that not just with like asset inventory. Like asset inventory, like everybody understands the need, but it's like, yeah, but that's not very much fun. So we do it with other things too. Like how about this? I'm gonna guess many of you deal with Amazon EC2, S3 buckets, maybe EKS, ECS, like all the different Amazon flavors, right? Well, we have a lab that you analyze all that different data and you try to figure out where the unauthorized activity was in an Amazon tenant. And then we do a different thing, very much different, with how can I find out if there's unauthorized changes to my AWS tenant? Well, we again do that with, guess what? Python, Bodo 3 library. And so that's actually against a live Amazon environment, my Amazon environment. So don't break it. But this is where I like that covering topics from different angles can be really helpful for figuring out, how to do your job better, whether you're an engineer, an analyst, a data scientist, a leader. And well, that's kind of some of the areas I'm trying to go through here. So I've been talking a lot from a chat side, just out of curiosity. Do you think, with some of you, I'm going to guess most of you have not done a role-based lab before. Do you understand the value you might be able to get out of this type of, courseware, lab written? Because this is the only, to my knowledge, this is the only SANS class that does this right now. But do you see the value in having role-based labs? And when I say role-based, the fact that there's more than one role and more than one lab on a given topic. What are your thoughts? So I'm looking at the comments. I know there's always a slight delay on here, but do you see where this might help one justify a course? Or really what I care about is less that one and more about apply things to your job better? Or any questions on this style of lab framework? And again, from the free ones that I'm going to release on Twitter and LinkedIn, I'm going to give you the master inventory lab, which is a Python script as well as an analyst. And it also will include the Sigma repo, the Sigma labs. And then moving forward, I'll probably add some like data scientist things, like, again, whether that's scripting, some type of fun GUI thing, maybe graph analysis. And it's kind of interesting. I really probably should be doing more of this in 530 because it's the all-round defender class. So the base of the pyramid, it applies to more people. But 555 is just my jam. It's my love. And if I'm gonna play video games, Final Fantasy Tactics, like this, yeah. And so that, yeah, and that's actually a really good point. Is it allows dividing and conquering in the lab, where everybody really is looking for different information, but it allows me to teach the topic. But then when we hit the lab, people learn specific to their job role what they want. And that's what I'm trying to go to. Yeah, so the free labs I'm going to release as a link on Twitter or LinkedIn. So for just information here real quick, I even have to remember where I put this. There we go. It'll be on either Twitter or LinkedIn under my handles here. And that will have a download link. It'll probably be either an Ignite or a Dropbox link or both. But you'll be able to download this VM. It'll just have 2 topics, 4 labs. And you won't have to register. I'm not requiring any registration for that. I don't even care if you tweet back. It's just if you like the labs, let me know, and ideally take the class. But if you don't take the class, that's fine too. Hopefully you find value in the labs. Now, any questions on the dual role labs? Yeah, so the LinkedIn link is, I'll post this to Steven because for whatever reason I can't do the comments. I'm not logged in. I do this all the time. So Steven will put the post there. And then the next step. So John Hubbard, who said super cool stuff, Justin, love it. What he's not telling you is he is the cyber defense blue team curriculum lead. And so everybody here is supposed to give him crap about the other SANS courses adopting this model. Because this is totally at author discretion. And one thing I'm always game for, 555, we have the multi-role based labs. Some labs I think will maybe even have more than 2 roles moving forward. We have a boot camp, which is a capture the flag style. You actually have 6 months access to it, and it takes you a long time to go through it. And we have a day 6 challenge and coin. So I keep adopting new learning methodologies in the class, but I'm just a person. And what I'm meaning by that is I'm open to suggestions on how to make the class even better. Like the capture the flag, the boot camp that you have 6 months access to is intense, but I would actually like to make it more of the I'd like to make it more of an actual game system. Like the job classes, right? You have engineer, analysts, cloud expert, data scientist, leaders, like, and as you answer certain questions, you kind of level up within the different categories. And then actually having like a graphical scorecard that you can show your workplace, your friends, or post on LinkedIn. I think that would be cool. I don't know if it's actually practical or if that's just me goofing off. But if you have suggestions on how to make the learning process better, whether that's more fun or you actually learn more, like these labs, they're just hands down, there's no way it's worse. Or instead of saying that with a negative, let me say this positive. I guarantee you, by having the role-based labs, that my students are learning more than they used to. Because this is I think I've taught 5 classes now with these role-based labs, and you can clearly see it. The questions asked, and there's a level up. Have I had any CISOs doing the leadership lab and actually implementing those skills? How far into leadership can these labs get? I have. I don't have very many leadership role-based labs currently, just being honest, right? But I have absolutely had multiple CISOs take the class, and especially the lab there, which was day 5, this one. This taught them how to use MITRE Navigator to actually communicate down to the team and up to the board or the other execs. And it's not hard, but you don't know what you don't know. Navigator is actually super flexible, super powerful. But questions I get every class in 555 and really even in 530, what data matters? What attacks is my industry prone to being hit with? Kind of a threat intel concept. Okay, based on those 2 things, I'm going to collect this data because you answer that specifically in the class. But then how do I operationalize that data? Because data without analysis is kind of like a paperweight. Well, then I also need detection, whether that's manual threat handling, automated alerts, you name it. That all can be mapped onto MITRE Attack Navigator. Let me see if I even have this on my system here real quick. I'm pretty sure I do. So just to give you kind of a sneak peek without going too far in here. Like if I open up Navigator and I add a layer, early on in day 1, we talk through concepts like, please be there. If not, yep, there we go. Like if you have application system and security, you roughly have this visibility. That's your Windows data. If you add in, say, for example, Microsoft Sysmon, that actually gives you substantially better data. This versus this. So one of the things in the class for leaders that we teach is, well, okay, given that, and I always forget this step, select annotated, give it a score value of 1, go to the next one, select annotated. This is just marking them. We need the scoring, and the lab teaches you this. Well, if it's in C and not B, these are the things that Sysmon gives you that are not in native Windows, application system security. So that's a gap. On the same token, that Sigma lab, what we go through is figuring out what automated alerts we have and what coverage does that give us from a MITRE technique. So it looks like this. But now I can compare, create layer from layers. Okay, show me where I have an alert rule, but it doesn't exist in my data source. So I don't have visibility. Well, these rules will never fire, even though I have rules for them. They'll never fire because I don't have the data source that it's searching. This lets me talk up or down depending on which team member I need to speak to. What I'm not showing here that is also covered is what attacks actually target your industry. That's a different thing that we talk about. That's very, very important for a CISO to know. But then who do you take that information to? And again, that's something that they learn during the labs. So yeah. I've taken a couple SANS classes where I could have benefited from having a pathway to choose from to keep within the allotted lab time. Yeah. So then that's one of the other things I like too, is for those of you who, and you know who I'm talking to, right? You know if it's you. If you are like 5-10 minutes in, you're like, I'm done with the lab, and you just like kick back and you're like drinking a pina colada, except for we don't have pina coladas in class. John, that's a note for you. We need pina coladas for our students. Then instead of just sitting there doing nothing, for me, I have a boot camp, so there's always something to do. But now you could jump into the other lab. Some students finish both labs in the time frame. I don't usually recommend that because I find it hard to believe that you've mastered the lab when you go through it that quickly. But that's what I like. It gives you options. Options are always good. So yeah. So challenge to you all. You know of a place where we can see events needed to map out each technique. Yeah, that's just going to be MITRE over and over and over. And then you might need to map that to Atomic Red or Caldera and all sorts of other tools, but MITRE is definitely going to be the source of truth for this. The pina colada be the award for those who finish all versions of the lab? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, question for you all. Like, it's kind of interesting, again, kind of on this concept of role-based labs or the job class concept. In my career, I've gone from analyst to engineer to a leader of a team to scripting to all over the place. And now I own my own company. I do co-managed SIEM, MSSP, network monitoring, cloud monitoring. But it's kind of interesting, even though I'm selling all those services, I'm heavily into scripting, and I love scripting, like Python, PowerShell, all day long. I'm happy. John just made a good point that whoever finishes all versions of the lab first wins, and that's one thing I've actually thought about adding to the class. What would your thoughts be if day one of class I added where you could run a command and it would create a unique token or an account for you and track your progress? And then I could actually put different things in the place so I could tell how far did you get in boot camp? How far did you get on labs? How well did you do on the day 6 capture the flag? Not me personally, but you. That way it could generate, again, a scorecard. And based on what labs and stuff you did, it'd be like, well, from an engineer stance, you're strong. From an analyst stance, you kind of struggling. And it gives you the ability to kind of compete back against yourself. And if you wanted to share the scorecard, you could, but that's not really the goal. The goal is just competing against yourself and tracking your own progress. Would that be of value, or would that make you think, nope, sounds like monitoring and sounds like it's something you're going to give my boss so they can whip me into shape? Like, would that be cool to actually have like some type of graphical scorecard that shows how well you're progressing in the class's content? Useful? Okay. I mean, it'd be a decent amount of work to pull it off, but I like Python. I like scripting, so maybe I might actually do that too. John, we probably need to have a strategy meeting on all the off the wall, like bleeding edge things we can do for our classes. Which we do anyway, by the way, clearly. So, okay. Well, are there any questions about this? Again, I could totally take the time and walk through the lab in detail, but what I'm going to do over the weekend again is I'm going to update the free labs I have on LinkedIn or Twitter. I will post those. So from seeing this, you're going to get access to 4 free labs over 2 topics. You can make it an option to opt in. Yeah, and to me, the scorecard thing, the tracking system would be opt-in only. I would never enforce that. Opt-in, you have to you would have to manually do something to turn it on. It would not be on by default. If at the end we get feedback on how to address the areas you're lacking or would like to improve, yes. Okay, yeah, so for me, the scorecard, I would have to track things per like labs or certain questions. And so therefore I would be able to tell you, here's what you need to do to improve. I could directly provide that feedback. Yeah, so that's why I kind of like that concept. It's almost like at SANS, one of the challenges we have with teaching students is that action card, like what steps to take next, because that really needs to be tuned to the student. Because if you're already strong in an area, why do we say keep practicing there, where we really want you to practice on your weaknesses if it matters to you? Yeah. Well, I mean, there's truth to that too, John. But it would make it easier. So, okay. All right. Well, everybody, you've got my information. This one I kind of intended to be short and sweet. Not really short, but sweet, to the point. You've got my LinkedIn, you've got my Twitter, you've got my email. If you have any suggestions for making the content better, more valuable, easier to ingest, parse, and that's funny because it's sim class, right? I honestly want to know. This is not like the daily feedback you get from SANS. This is direct to me, and I'm not even necessarily going to share it with SANS. Just me as an individual wanting to see how I can level up my game. I think this is it. So stay tuned for that free download link and more awesome stuff. Yeah. With that, enjoy your weekend and stay in touch. We'll keep these live streams going. So thanks everybody, and we'll go from there.